Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hello. Good morning. My name is Hillary Lewis. I'm the Vice President of School Leadership at Teach for America, and I am thrilled to see you all in this room. Hope everyone had an excellent night last night. It's 11 a.m. You're feeling caffeinated and ready to go. We're really excited for this conversation today. This portion of the day is focused on dialogues about really thorny topics in education. Across the entire Teach for America spectrum, people have opinions on these topics that range from one end to the other, and this conversation will be exemplary of that. Throughout the conversation today, we will be asking folks to put your questions onto index cards, which will be coming down your rows in a little bit. And about halfway through this session, we'll be collecting those so that I can make sure that we have as many representative questions heard throughout the Q&A section to our panelists. So 2 of my colleagues will be handing those out down your aisles in the next few minutes. Please jot as many questions as you would like, and we'll collect those in about 30 minutes. And with that, we are going to get started. So I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Jeremy Beard, who is currently the head of schools for Yes Prep Public Schools. Prior to that, he was the National Director of Programs for Blueprint Schools Network, a principal at Idea College Prep, and the head of the Apollo 20 School Project in Houston ISD. He started his Teach for America life as a 1995 Los Angeles Corps member, has 4 adorable children that I think we're going to hear a little bit more about, and is really well positioned with his work in this field to ask some interesting and challenging questions of our panelists. So with that, please welcome Jeremy.
Thank you, Hillary. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm happy to see you here. I'm happy to see our panelists here and to have an open dialogue to speak our truths about closing this opportunity gap for our children. So thank you for being here this morning. As we get started, I just want to ground us in the challenge that we have faced as a country for many years. This graph here just pointing back over the past 60 years to the 40s, and how we see that significantly this correlation between the income gap among our families has also driven the achievement and the opportunity gap. And so when we think about the opportunity gap, here, the opportunity gap is the disparity in access to quality schools and the resources needed for all children to be academically successful. And so we see, low-income and minority families have less access to resources such as AP classes, interventions, good teachers, good leaders. And so this gap remains significant and drives this achievement gap that we have seen in our country for many years. We've seen some progress. More African American and Latino students are graduating from high school and more are earning college degrees. In 2003, the African American high school graduation rate was 59%. In 2012, that rose to 68%. During that same period, the Hispanic graduation rate increased from 66% to 76%. And so although that we've seen some progress, we know that it's not enough. And as practitioners, we look to our families, to our children, to our communities, and we need to listen first and think what's important and hard in this necessary work to provide equity and opportunity. We need to bring them to the table as we consider these hard decisions around building the best schools for our children. For me, this is very personal. What role can schools play? What role can you play? As a father of 4 boys, tried for the girl, I'm tapping out. As a father of 4 boys, of 4 black and brown men, and we've seen what has happened in the fight that those men have faced in our country going back historically to the days of slavery and oppression. And for me to think that there's this gap, that they don't have access, it's not okay. And as a father, I've heard, the research tell me 100 years, maybe 200 years, we can close this gap. I'm not okay with that. I want to close it in this lifetime. And I'm a 1995 Corps member, so I know I don't have much time left. We pay $30,000 for for an incarcerated person in our country and only $8,000 on average to educate a child. We have incarceration versus education. We have a modern-day plantation, a pipeline to jail instead of emancipation. I'm not okay with that. And I hope you are not okay with that as well. What role can schools play? What role can you play? I've often looked to our elders and hear my father, who at age 16 was willing to give his life for this cause. And at age 16, during the sit-ins in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and was thrown in jail and continued to fight as a young man. And to this day, 70 years old, still teaching black and brown children right across the river in Prince George's County. And for him, in Prince George's County, growing up, knowing that the schools were not good enough for his son or not good enough for the children he was serving, was frustrated. And so he went to an alternative school to catch those students on the back end, frustrated with leadership, frustrated with teachers, just frustrated with a system that was broken. And then frustrated with that, so he started his own school, him and another teacher. So when you get kicked out of school in PG, you go to alternative school. And when you get kicked out of that school, you go see my dad. And to this day, my dad has a 93% GED attainment passing rate. I'm like, Pops, when are you going to retire, man? He's like, I still have work to do. We still have work to do. But we can't catch them on the back end. We have to figure out how can we catch them on the front end. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And so as we think about schools that are underperforming, most commonly we see different models. We see a turnaround model where we may go in and replace a principal. We may replace teachers. We see restarts. We're going to reopen the school and we're going to bring a different operator or a charter. We see transformation where we're going to replace a principal and then bring in some interventions or strategies. Or often, which is very controversial, we close the community school. Now, there are many other models. These are ones we see most common. And today, you're going to hear from our panelists some of those different models. Before we begin today with our panelists, I just want to poll the crowd and get a sense of who is in the crowd as far as stakeholders. So if you are a student, can you just raise your hand? Okay, we have some students in the crowd. If you're a parent from our community, some parents, okay? You may fall in many categories. If you're a community leader, okay? If you are a state or district leader, okay? Any school partnership organizations? Okay, some partnerships. Teachers. All right, okay. You guys see your audience. Okay. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we will get started today. I have a few questions for them, and then we'll have some questions for the crowd. So I want to start with Chris Stewart. Chris, you want to raise your hands? There you go. Thank you. Chris Stewart, Director of Outreach and External Affairs Education Post. He was, prior to that, the Executive Director of the African American Leadership Forum. In 2007, Chris was elected to the Minneapolis Public School Board of Education. In that role, he helped establish the Office of New Schools, and at the same time created the Equity and Achievement Committee authored at the board level. Steve Zimmer, down at the end. How's it going, Steve? Board President, Los Angeles Unified School District. He is a 17-year veteran. He joined Teach for America in 1992, working as an ESL teacher at Marshall High School in Silver Lake. He founded the Ellison Valley United Community Service Center. As a school board member elected in 2009, he was reelected in 2013. Scott Gordon is, Scott, right here. Chief Executive Officer of Mastery Charter Schools, done some amazing work and turned around 11 turnaround schools there in Philadelphia. He will talk about that. He's the founder, CEO of Mastery Charter Schools. Scott, as Mastery Latin Fest Campus first principal in 2001, he transitioned to the CEO role as Mastery and extended to multiple campuses and multiple turnaround schools in Philadelphia. Como Basin is the principal of Up Academy Leonard, a neighborhood district public middle school with Lawrence Public Schools in the Turnaround Initiative in Massachusetts. Prior to working at Up Academy, Ms. Basin was the principal of Excel Academy Charter School in East Boston. Prior to that, she was the founding assistant principal of KIPP Affiliated School in New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Vanessa Rodriguez, good friend in 95 Cornrow like myself. 95. She is the Chief Talent Officer of Newark Public Schools. And there she has 69 schools, 7,000 employees, almost 40,000 children. It's the largest and one of the oldest school systems in New Jersey. Prior to that, she was the Chief Executive Officer of District 79 in New York City. Prior to that, she had worked at New Leaders, New School, and Teach for America. And finally, another good friend, Alan Smith, Chief of Schools in Oakland Public Schools. He grew up in Denver. Go Broncos. Easy. In 2003, Alan founded Skyland Community High School. He was promoted as the executive director of the Turnaround Initiative, the Denver Summit Schools Network, which saw significant growth in years 1 and on. And from there, he has moved on to Charlotte Mecklenburg, and then now he is working with Antoine Wilson and some turnaround schools in Oakland Public Schools. So just a quick round of applause for our panel. They've done some amazing work. So to get us started, I'm gonna make sure we have enough time. I'm gonna ask us to commit to 2 minutes, team, to my left. And I have two questions to start us off. So when a school has failed academically, persistently, or not serving the needs of our children, what course of action should be taken and why, and what informs your belief? So I'm gonna actually ask Scott to start us off and try to keep it to 2 minutes. Thanks, Scott.
Great. First of all, it's a real honor to be here. 30 seconds of context, Mastery has 11 turnaround schools in Philly and 3 in Camden, transformation schools. They are neighborhood schools, meaning operating the same enrollment rules as traditional district schools. I think our work is framed by the recognition that in many ways, struggling schools are the distillation, the sort of concentration of the challenges this country faces fundamentally to fulfill the promise of public education, fulfill the promise, frankly, of the American dream. And I would say one of the things we have recognized is that when school districts or charters think about transforming a school, we have to recognize that we are just the latest chapter in a long history of struggle and, unfortunately, of tragedy, of chronic disinvestment often in our community's history of racism, and that there's both been struggle and triumph in that community. So I would say first is sort of a recognition of where we are relative to the history of that community and what's at stake. The second is a recognition that it's obviously there's academic needs that need to be addressed, and we need a well-organized, excellent school. But there are also the challenges of addressing the consequences of poverty and concentrated poverty. So the work is both academic and dealing with social emotional skills, which is a complex undertaking. As I last for my 2 minutes, it absolutely can be done. Our schools are resilient, our kids are resilient. It is also really hard. And so when we think about what are the options, one of the questions that I think we need to ask is who can do the work, district or charter, to deliver the comprehensive solutions that our schools need.
Thank you, Scott. Vanessa?
Way to start us off with an easy question, Jeremy. So in Newark, my experience there in particular, and I'm sure many of you have heard lots of different things about Newark, it's not one answer or one solution fits all. I think we took the approach that if schools aren't fulfilling the need of our students, then we need to think about more than one approach. So we came up with One Newark, which is come together with everyone and really talk about what are the different challenges in the various schools. So for me, there's not just one way. We have to partner with charters. If we're working in a district, we have to think about turnaround, restart, all of them. And you have to look at each individual school, but you also have to look at all of the schools in that community together. So when you make a decision around one school, it's going to impact the school that's around the corner. It's going to impact the high school if you're addressing an issue in the elementary level. So it's got to be a cohesive plan, and it has to be in partnership, not just with the other schools in that community, whether they're charter or private, but with the families of the students. Often our families were also employees of the district, so it made it that much more complicated for the work that we were doing in Newark in trying to really address a lot of the challenging schools. Our performance in our schools when we arrived about 5 years ago now, were terrible, and we were trying to figure out how do we revive these district schools. And part of that process was really collaborating and coming together with other folks. I think it's often really easy to tell a single story about this work, and it's so much more complex. There is no single story, not even in Newark, and many people are trying to tell an easy story about the work that's happened there, but it is way more complex. And I think we have to remember that as we're looking at our schools that are struggling, that there are layers. First, it starts with our families. How are we thinking and working with them collaboratively? And then how are we working together as a community of school leaders and educators? And it's way more complex than I think is being told right now.
Thank you,
I'll leave it
Vanessa.
there.
Thanks. Alan?
Thank you. So I want to start off by saying a little bit about where I've come from and where I am now. In Denver, we did this work of turning around 11 schools, and of course, we're met with some opposition from communities and families, for better or for worse. People don't like change. In Oakland, California, I have security guards, and I live an hour and a half out because my kids have been threatened, and they've keyed and scratched up my car. The first thing that you have to realize is this work is hard, and it is tough. But if this is your life's mission, you got to do it. You cannot allow schools to stay open that are failing, and you have to realize that it's not usually just one school, but there's a feeder pattern of schools because students go from elementary to middle to high school. So you see how this affects a community. You have to be bold, and you have to set on a course that just changing a few things in schools is not going to change a school radically. You have to truly transform that school. And so what this means is you have to look at turnaround, you have to look at transformation, and you have to look at something different than what these students and what this community has experienced before. And then you have to have an honest assessment. Do you have the resources and capacity to get the work done? Is there a true appetite for doing this in a scalable way that will make a difference, not unlike what we've seen in pockets where there's been turnaround, but how are we going to do this to truly, truly help all students be successful? And to do that well, one of the things that we did was we had an outside partner in Blueprint in Denver, and that partner is coming to Oakland with us. That partner is important because we need somebody, you will need somebody to turn or help you, hold you accountable for the work that you are doing, give you honest assessment, and also help you align to things that you may have not seen before as a district partner. What we did in Denver and now in Oakland that I think is very important, we identified pillars that we wanted these schools to have, and each one of our students and our communities to be represented by. And that is, we have to, of course, pay attention to the human capital. We have to have strong leaders in schools. We have to have strong teachers in our classroom, and we truly have to invest in them. We have to have a true college-going culture. I love banners, and I love seeing all the college flags in the rooms. But what does a true college-going culture mean? It means rigor. It means setting the stage that students will get to school, and it means that the instruction and the way students are talked to means that their life will go on past 12th grade. We have to extend the day and the year. People may not like to hear that, but there's been a lot of research that says truly if students that are low performing are going to catch up with students that are high performing, either there's two ways you can do it. You can let the students that are high performing only go to school for 4 days, and let the low performing students go to school for 5 days, or you can extend the day and extend the year. And then really assessments, real-time assessments. Our students need to know where they are, our teachers need to know where our students are, and we need to make with those assessments real-time adjustments and interventions and accelerations so that students can get the help that they need right away. So this is some of the things that I think we need to do, but it has to start with making the commitment, no matter how hard the work is, to take the stand and actually do it.
Thank you, Alan. Como?
All right, good morning. So I'm not as powerful or influential as any of the folks on this panel, so I'm very much starstruck, and if you can take some pictures of us, that would be great. And my email address is kbasine@upacademyleonard.org. I would love that. But I don't know if I can talk as much at scale as these guys, but I can tell you from my perspective as a building principal of a neighborhood district public school, where all of the students who come to my school are zoned to my school. There's no option to variance out. So you come here, and we have the responsibility and the privilege to work with every single student to help them find success. And our school was actually, after being classified as one of the lowest performing schools in the state of Massachusetts 4 years ago, was recently designated as level 1 this December, which is really exciting. And that applause goes to the kids and the teachers, to be honest. And so I think from my perspective as a principal, I think that reform is very important, but it must be done. But it can't be done to principals, it can't be done to teachers, it can't be done to families, and it can't be done to communities. It has to be done with all of those partners. And I think from a district level, one of the things that Lawrence Public Schools has done incredibly well is try to give principals the support and the autonomy. So both support and autonomy to live up to these expectations that they are best serving their teachers, their parents, and ultimately their students. And so in order to do that, every school that is failing or would be failing, the principal needs to sit down and think to themselves, how can I make sure that every student is in class learning high quality material all the time? And that looked very different for every school in our district. We had some schools that just needed to extend the day. We had other schools that, through a partnership with the unions, were able to sort of really give teachers a voice in the change. The school I was working at, what we heard from families when we did home visits to all the families in our building over the year that our school was slated for turnaround, we heard that parents wanted our school to be safe. That was the first expectation they had of us, and they did not feel that that was the case. So, our approach as a school was first to create, think about what can we do centrally to support our teachers. It wasn't that we had bad teachers in our building. It was that our teachers were doing 17,000 jobs. They were being mental health workers. They were being social workers. They were doing all kinds of, they were coaching. They were, feeding students. They were doing so many different things. And as a principal, my job was to create centralized behavior systems that supported teachers. I cover detention so that my teachers can tutor, so that they can coach, so that they can pull kids out of detention and have those conversations. So that was the first thing. And we created these systems to maximize time on task. The second thing, as any of us know who work in schools, those systems work for about 75% of students on the best day. And so we really had to go in and think about that bottom 25%, let's be honest, 50%, and really think about, how do we make these systems work for these students? These students can't unenroll. There's nowhere else for them to go. It is our responsibility to serve them. And how do we avoid the spin-out cycle of, great, you're suspended, go home, now you're not learning. Come back tomorrow, get suspended, go home. Because that's actually, that's very damaging to students, but it's also in some ways pretty fun, right? Cool, now I can swear and I'll go play video games all day. So we staffed up, and Lawrence Public Schools gave principals the autonomy to control their budgets. So instead of, as a principal, being told, in my previous jobs I'd been told, you have some discretionary funding, you can buy some more paper this year, woo. Now I have this spreadsheet, and I have to think about how do we staff up to support the students that we have. So we increased class sizes. Our class sizes are range from 30 to 35, and this was done with the support of our teacher leadership teams, which was another expectation from our district, that teachers have a voice. And we staffed up. We have 2 support teachers to help with behavior intervention. We have a social worker. We have a school psychologist that works exclusively with our school. We have a family engagement coordinator. And all of these folks work in partnership with teachers. Our observing classrooms are sitting next to our most at-risk students to help them stay on track. And then how do we invest our students and families? At Lawrence Public Schools, our superintendent Riley is a big fan of saying, we don't just work by treating our students differently from suburban students. All of the things that they have in the suburbs that make schools feel exciting, feel like school. Do you have enrichment activities? Do you have sporting events? Do you have school carnival every year? Do you have a positive behavior incentive system? Do you have academic nights where parents can come in and learn about what your students are doing? Do you have a poetry slam? Do you get to pie the principal in the face once a year? I mean, these are things, I would argue that all of those things are academic. And by the way, to pie me, you have to memorize at least 100 digits of pi. And then finally, as I said before, this can't happen to teachers, it has to happen with teachers. And a big focus of our leadership team over the past 3 years has been thinking about how to help teachers not feel like cogs in the wheel, but as empowered partners in leading the school, as the most important players in the school staff to work with the most important people in our students' lives, their parents and families, to think about how to create school success. So that was over 2 minutes, but I'm the principal several times.
Sorry, you're on my list, Coleman. All right. Chris.
So I do not know 100 digits of pi. I feel insignificant. I'm honored to be here today with you all to talk about something that I think is deeply important. My job, in the job that I have, I get to travel to lots of communities and just ask people basic questions about what they think about their schools and ask different levels of leadership within schools. What do they think is working and isn't working? This question, I think, is a powerful one. It's a great one because it assumes that you want to do something when schools are failing. I go to so many places where I think that there's this kind of an immoral acceptance of the fact that melanin and low poverty or low income means you're going to fail. And accepting that for years and years and years and years in some districts is acceptable. Like you can live like that. You can still make your money and get your little 6 figures and still do your job. We have a whole middle class kind of working over whole school districts in some places where they are basically harvesting kids for their per pupil income year after year and sending them to economic exile, and they'll never be in the American mainstream. So this question, at least this question acknowledges that there's a problem and that there might be some political will to do something about the problem. Now, once you're mature enough to say we have a problem and we want to do something about it, then you encounter another problem. I think Vanessa hit on it, which is that there are no easy answers. This isn't for wimps. How do you turn around a failing school? I don't know. Because I've seen plans win and I've seen plans fail, and they're the same plan, but it just depends on leadership and implementation and what are you going to do and what are you committed, are you going to sustain it over time? And all of these factors have failed in different places. So this is not a game for wimpy people who are going to look at a problem and it's going to be big, hairy, and nasty, and they're going to run away. And I'll tell you, in a room like this, I often say, some of y'all are the true blue education radicals. You're going to make it happen, and some of y'all not going to make it, right? That's just racial physics. You're going to get in the middle of this. You're going to question yourselves in the fight, and some of you are not going to make it. That's one of the problems with this question, is how do you make it happen? Because some people will fight it for a couple of years, and then it's too much. I will say this. You have to at least make sure that you're going to have some action when you discover you have a failing school. The goal of everybody is when kids are in trouble is to get them to safe harbor. Any moral people, when you look and you see kids are in trouble, you will move them into safe harbor. What does that mean in terms of schools and turning them around in failing schools? For me, it means there might be some diagnosis of the levels of failure. You just might need soft assistance, technical assistance, some more resources, some light help and some money, some things that help you do a better job. You might need a hard intervention. And that might be a change in staff and a change in program. And eventually you might get to the point where you say this school has to cease being, right? No matter where you are on the continuum of that failure, you have to be committed to acting and doing something. What informs my beliefs around these things? I am not a principal, I'm not a school leader, I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator. I was a pissed off parent at one point. And I remain a pissed off old man now that I got gray hair in my beard. It appeared to me that my choices were all hard as a parent, and the education establishment just didn't get me when I was saying that my kid needs to learn to read and to write to have a better life than I had and a better education than I had. That's how I came into this game. I eventually started working in welfare to work programs, and I was helping people fill out applications to Subway who had multiple kids, and they couldn't complete the application. And I would say, you were with professionals for 12 years, and I'm helping you fill out an application to Subway, right? That got me interested in what you do when a school is failing in communities over and over again, because the consequences aren't visible to you just in the 12 years that you have the students. The consequences live on after that. So in traveling, this is what I have found. When I go to schools and poor kids are doing well, there are 3 things that I notice that are in most of those places. And this isn't rocket science, so don't write this down, y'all. Strong educational leadership, strong leadership in the building. A building leader who is competent because a pack runs at the pace of its leader. So you need a competent, strong educational leader in the building. And you need strong staff who are committed, who have signed on to a mission with that. That's number 2. And number 3 is you need a strong educational philosophy. People need to actually be signed on to something in the same building. If you have those 3 things, I don't think that still gets you to where you need to be 100%. You could still fail with those. But in the places where I see people knocking it out of the park, I've seen that turnaround education outcomes. The last thing I'll say, this is a problem with no easy answers, but it does really come down to people in the building. Even a Carmen Farina, when she came into a new school, she got rid of like 80% of staff. She didn't do it, she did it kind of in a soft way, but there were some people that were invited to be successful elsewhere. And things changed. So I just want to put that on the table, that people matter, program matter, and leadership matters.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And I want Steve, please.
Yeah. First of all, let me just say I'm very honored to be on this panel with everybody here and really some incredible leaders on this panel. I started my career, my core experience in 1992 in Los Angeles as an ESL teacher. Over 80% of my students, we assume, were undocumented at that time. And 2 years later, with the leadership of Governor Pete Wilson, there was an effort to literally eradicate my students and their families from the state of California and the public school system, called Proposition 187. In the second half of my career, I worked almost entirely with substance addicted and gang involved youth as a teacher and as a counselor during a time when there was literally an explosion of the school to prison pipeline, where the answer for youth that were struggling and that were crying out to us was, again, basically to eliminate them, separate them, segregate them from our schools and from our communities. And so what informs me about this is having spent my career working with students with whom I am very clear what the mindset is, the dominant mindset is about the students and families whom I work with the closest, the students and the families who have shown me over and over and over and over again the lie of this dominant mindset, who have shown me over and over and over again when there is connection, when there is a change, even a one-to-one interpersonal change in the mindset about what is possible for them, and who believes in them, and who trusts them, and who loves them, that change is absolutely possible. And success can come in a flow just like it flowed the other way when the mindset had not been changed. So when we talk about what to do, my response in my role as a teacher, as a counselor, as an activist, and as a system leader is everything and then more. But if we do not commit ourselves to eradicating deficit mindset and deficit thinking about our children, about their families, about our communities, and yes, about our teachers and about our schools, then whatever this is, whatever the structure of change is, if there is not first a change in hearts and minds, then there is not, then the best plan will not be, you could get some incremental changes, you can even get some spikes, because some plans are damn good and compelling. But when the work gets hard, in terms of all that we know that is involved in the systemically racist structures that still exist in many of our communities, if we do not have the courage to do the hearts and minds work with everyone who touches a child's life, then a lot of these changes will not be truly sustainable.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so I'm going to ask our panelists, we're going to get into some specific topics and ask them, a few of them, to answer questions. I'd ask our panelists to stick to a minute because I want to make sure we have enough time to also get to our Q&A with the audience, okay? So we're just a minute over, so that was good. But now I might have to jump in and wrangle you a little bit if you go over, all right? All right, so we're going to start with Alan and Vanessa. You know, both of you have been part of tough decisions to either close schools or take on turnarounds. Wanted, if maybe you could take a minute to describe the context around those decisions, specifics you want to share about the approach, what worked, what would you do differently? I know it's a huge question, Vanessa looking at me, rolling her eyes to the side. But let's just start setting the stage with both Oakland and or Denver, Alan, if you want to talk about that, or Newark. And we'll start with Vanessa. What was happening on the ground to lead to the decision to either take on turnaround or close schools? Maybe one thing went well, one thing you do differently. Recommendations for us.
Okay. 1 minute.
1 minute.
There was a book written about this, right? Okay, the first thing that I think is important to know is the struggle that I personally and our leadership team had around the sense of urgency to make schools better immediately. We walked into schools where kids, it was terrible to see some of the things that adults were doing in that building and allowed to do for decades. So when you have that sense of urgency, I have an 8-year-old son, and when I would walk into our schools, I wouldn't want my son there, and that was not okay. So there were schools that were struggling facilities-wise. Our buildings in Newark, many of them are over 100 years old and literally had not been taken care of. Performance of our students was abysmal. Teachers were not teaching. Many of them felt that their job was to babysit. We had a $70 million deficit that we were trying to address, a budget gap that we were working to close. We were competing with charters who had approved 10-year growth plans, and we could see our students over time. We would be a 40% city of charters, and our population of students were often our most struggling students. And we needed a plan fast. It was not okay what was happening for our kids. And so the struggle between you have a sense of urgency to make it better tomorrow, and you want to bring along a community that often were our employees, our parents. Newark Public Schools is the largest employer of Newark residents. So that tells you a lot about the challenge we were having. We had more adults than we needed in the school system. So when you have a decline in enrollment, a decline in the number of the students you have, and the same number of adults over a series of years, you have to also make a change there, and especially if there's no performance of students. So the first year, I know you said a minute, I'm really trying. The first year we really tried to really think about tackling the issue around leadership. We went really hard at who are our principals. We created a teacher framework, a principal framework, and we focused really hard on talent. Do we have the right people? Do we have the people who are going to teach well, lead well, and ensure that our children are receiving the education that they need? We had a 60% turnover in principals that first year. I think sometimes retention is a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. So we worked really hard at that. That first year we also had a ton of community dialogue about the reality of what was happening in our schools and that we needed to do something different. The Zuckerberg money came, and half of that money went to a teacher contract because our teachers were without a contract and we needed to have a performance-based teacher contract. So that was a huge focus for us. We wanted to reward our high-performing teachers, and we wanted to make sure that our teachers were doing the work that they wanted to do and they were being supported, both financially as well as through other resources. And then we had to make a decision around which schools really needed to have a significant change. And so we put a plan together where we did close schools, we turned around schools, we partnered with charters where we had a charter come in and actually take over one of our school buildings. We did all of those things, and we did it really fast. And so as I think about when you do that so fast, people feel loss. And I don't know how to create the space for them to mourn what they're losing, but still do what's right for children. And so that, I think, I struggle with a lot. I also implemented over the course of the 3 years I was there, each year, a layoff of employees because we had more adults than we needed to run our organization. And many of those employees were parents of our children. That was not easy, but absolutely necessary. And so I struggle with that too, a great deal. It's not easy to put a parent out of work. So those are some of the issues I think that we really confronted, but I truly believe it was necessary to give our children a better opportunity. So for example, we partnered with Uncommon. 30 seconds. We partnered with
15
Uncommon,
seconds, please.
and they took over one of our K-4s. Now, usually they grow 1 year at a time, but we were able to come together through the work we did around universal enrollment, and they took over one of our lowest performing schools, Alexander Street School, and within a year, those students outperformed all the other students in Newark on the PARCC test, which we were like, what? How did this happen in 1 year? And so that just goes to show, like, sometimes you do need to just rip off the Band-Aid and do something drastically different if our kids are going to be better off. And as adults, we got to just come along.
Thank you, Vanessa. Alan, you're up. I know you led the Turnaround Initiative in Denver Public Schools. You saw some significant growth both in reading and math. I wanted you to share maybe what were some things that you feel led to the success of the initiative. What would you might go back and do differently?
Yeah, so thank you, and I will take a Vanessa minute, if I may.
Y'all don't get embarrassed. I've known y'all for a while, so let me go there.
So let me give you some context to what's happening in Denver and then what I'm seeing in Oakland with some percentages. 60% graduation rate, 90% incarceration rate in Oakland. 9 out of 10 kids, if they do not finish high school in Oakland, will go to jail. 30% eligible for UC schools if they do graduate, which means they have to have all the A through G requirements. And out of those 30% that are eligible for UC schools, only 23% actually apply for college. That, to me, is enough reason to do this work. And it is important that we look at all children, but especially those black and brown children who have been living in these communities and going to these schools for years where things have been tried, some successfully, some not so successfully, are just left to their own devices whether or not they can sink or swim. We have to start allowing these students to dream with their eyes open, which means we have to get in there and do the work, which means we got to focus on human capital. Having the very best leaders and the very best teachers in front of these students is not too much to ask. Going out and getting them from all over the world should be what we focus on. Then also putting in programs, and not just programs that are nice and shiny and that you see are the next best things, but proven programs that have a success record. We put in math tutoring program in Denver through Blueprint. And this program gave students an additional 60 minutes of tutoring along with their math class each day. What we saw was this impacted every subject in their day, and the results shot up. We went from being failing schools in the state of Colorado to meeting or exceeding state and district mandates in 1 year, and it was recognized by the White House. But it was still not enough. We had to take a look at what we're going to do to sustain these, because the real question is not how you get this started, but how do you keep this going? So you may see some success, but you also have to remember that 3, 5, 6 years down the road, you cannot forget and you cannot rest. And so we have to continually be in the business of changing and adapting and making things better for these students and these schools. And we have to do that with community involvement and engagement, both internal to the school community and external to the school community. Why is that important? Because as it has been said, people don't like things being done to them. They like to do things together and with you. And we have to realize that if we want this to work, school leaders may come and go, teachers may come and go, but the community usually stays the same. And so we have to do a fair amount of adult education on what this means for our students. I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, appreciate it. I want to move to Scott and Como, and maybe I'll start, Como, with you. You know, your approaches to school turnaround and mastering up are different, but there's some similarities. So maybe talk about your approach so everyone here can hear some of the basic strategies. And then think maybe, you know, as what is your advice to schools or school systems consider around employing a turnaround model like Mastery or Up? You know, when do we make this decision? When should we not make the decision?
Both of those in 1 minute? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Hello. So in terms of context on the model that we've used at our school, I would say there's about 5 key principles, which I will allocate 5 seconds each to. I would say the bedrock is consistency. So we have school-wide expectations and rules that we implement consistently in every single classroom. Now that creates a floor. So our teachers are all implementing the same rules so that they can focus their intellectual energy on the ceiling, teaching in engaging ways, investing their students, building relationships. We have centralized support for enforcing that to maximize time on instruction in classrooms. So for example, if there's a rule in our school that you come in uniform. So I check the uniforms at the door every single day. If you don't have a belt, you go to the office where we have a wall full of belts, and you find one that fits. Same with shoes, same with shirts, same with pants. And so these centralized supports allow teachers, again, to maximize class time. Teachers aren't losing 5 minutes checking every single uniform. We have a choice-based system of behavior expectations that is tracked through students earning merits or demerits. And these points accrue, and the next piece would be that there's a school-wide system of incentives and consequences that go. So if you choose to make certain productive academic choices, there is a series of rewards, which aren't just, you know, carrots and externalized things. They're also time with teachers and books and the opportunity to engage in trivia. And then as well, if you choose to make choices that are detracting time for learning, you're going to make that time up after school, certainly. There's a strong network of supports, and I think this is one of the biggest pieces that we've had to invest in over the past 3 years, given our school community. For our large population of students with emotional disabilities, with just learned strong frustrated responses to situations that may not go as expected, we've developed a strong system of behavior plans and interventions for our students. And finally, the piece that makes this all work is the coaching we're able to provide teachers. We have two protected teacher coaches who spend their entire time, they're deans of curriculum, working with teachers to help to support them in building their practice. So this is a very sort of unique model that we've learned through our partnership with the UP Education Network that we're able to implement in our schools with the support of our families. Whether to implement this, whether to make this decision in your particular school, I mean, I think it really depends on the population you're working with. Our school was in need of restart. That was declared by the state, given the performance based on school observations and the academic results that had been prevented. And so this model is a restart model. It works with the same population of students, the same community. There's no change in the student body, but there is a change in the way that the entire school works together to support that. However, there were other schools in the district that were not failing to the extent that our school was, and so this decision was made sort of not to implement that model. But again, I think it really depends on the school. I mean, I think it also depends on the capacity of the school team to implement that. The huge risk when you say 100% is that if you can only implement it at 75%, you do more damage than good, because you create a strong sense of distrust in the system. When you say 100 and you mean and you actually are implementing at 75%, you alienate all of your constituents, the most important people, the students and the families. And so really, if you can live up to what you promise, then you should do it. But you should under-promise and over-deliver rather than the way around.
Awesome. Thank you, Cole.
Thanks. I want to think about what Mastery's model. I want to build on something Steve started, which is not to have a deficit mindset. So that the expectation, the vision of the school is a great school where kids can be happy, can learn critical thinking as well as foundational skills. And your North Star is what we want for all kids. So that means having a school culture that is joyful. It means delivering a curriculum and supports to teachers around Common Core aligned instruction, kids working in teams, hand-on learning, the things that we want for all kids. Part of delivering that, besides a good school district has the supports for teachers and curriculum and so forth, is, again, the mindset. So something that Mastery has embarked upon last year is ensuring that cultural context is an important part of the way all teachers are prepared, that we're recognizing our own bias, we're recognizing the context of our students, and that's part of the work of creating relationships in a joyful school. Second, that we are recognizing that there are consequences to poverty, and that as a school, if we're going to be successful, we need to address them. So many of the things that they do at UP, similar at Mastery, there's a focus on trauma-informed care and training staff in trauma-informed care, focus on restorative practices, which is a way to build community around really trauma-informed care, frankly, and then having appropriate responses for kids all along the continuum. So certainly for emotional support classes and interventions in the school, and then Mastery, now we are serving 12,000 students. We have a separate school for kids who are face severe mental health issues, so that we can continue to serve them all along the continuum. Last thought, I just want to respond to what you said, Chris, is why certainly this is hard. I push back a little in that we need everyone. We need to make sure that the folks who commit to careers in teaching can do this work and feel great. So part of, I think, that the role of Mastery as a school district is to ensure that the supports, both the practical supports, the time, and frankly, the emotional supports and community as an organization are present so folks feel that they can do this work and be happy. So.
Thank you, Scott. And before I go to Chris and Steve, we're collecting cards, so if you have questions, just make sure you hand them to one of the facilitators so we can open it up. After Chris and Steve get a chance to answer the question I have, we're going to open it up. So, Chris and Steve, I want to talk about the role of parents as well as the impact of school leadership at a systemic level. And I'll start with Chris. So how do you think we as educators should interpret parent choices generally when it comes to failing schools? Specifically, what should we take away from the cases where parents choose schools that are failing?
So a couple of things. One, when someone sits on a panel and they tell you that 90% is the incarceration rate in an American city in 2016, and that's mostly black and brown boys, it should set the room on fire. It really should, right? That should be a showstopper of something. We just said it in the middle of a bunch of stuff, but That's basically genocide of a people. We know what that story, what the end of that story is, right? We know how that ends up for a community and for a people, which is why I think the education piece is so important. Now, for the question that I'm being asked with the 1 minute, I'm not going to take a Vanessa minute. I'll take a New York minute. So the question that I'm being asked is around what should we think of parents when they choose these bad schools, which I think is the wrong question to ask. And what should educators interpret of those choices? Educators shouldn't interpret those choices. Educators should educate children where they are, in the buildings where they are, with the kids that they have, and they should leave the judgment at home, right? So parents make decisions for all kinds of reasons around schools, and if you have to even ask the question, it means you don't know parents, right? It means you haven't answered it for yourself. You don't even know them well enough. We need a little more anthropology and a little less psychology when it comes to parents, all right? You need to go live in the hut instead of sitting on the hill talking about the hut, right? And that might help you answer this question a little bit better for yourself. There is a student economy in every city. People are moving students around for all kinds of reasons. I ran a black organization that had everything from the mom on welfare to millionaires, and they had all made tough decisions around schools. That included some moves and some finagling and using other people's addresses and stuff. Who in this room hasn't had somebody in their family use somebody else's address and whatnot? I've been a traditional public school parent, a charter school parent, a private school parent, and right now I have 2 in our neighborhood district traditional public school. I have made all of those decisions because I am ruthless about the intellectual development of my children, and I will do what I gotta do to get them where they have to get, but it doesn't always work out. Right now, the 2 that are in that school's a 4 out of a 10 in the great schools, and here I am talking about education all the time. Why would I do that? Am I ignorant? I just think it's the wrong question. Teach the kids that you have, get them to proficiency so that they can have a real life. And let's put the judgment questions aside. I think that was a minute.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. So, Steve, you and I go way back. I remember those Sundays back in the 90s. We used to get together on Sunday mornings as teachers and try to, with other teachers in LA, and try to figure out how do we better serve the needs of our kids. So I miss those days, Steve. So, but I'm going to ask you, if you want to speak on that, that's fine. But actually, I'm going to ask you maybe to talk from a systematic level. You spent nearly 2 decades committed to education to the children in LA. From what I know, and knowing you personally, your views see a great deal of nuances in the decisions around improving student educational opportunities for children. What should we think about in regards to your experience to systematic collapse and how we need to think about policy, wraparound services, school climate work, equity index, and redistribution of resources to create change for children and communities? And how do you make this change sustainable at a high level? Like we see successes, but then it backslides after a couple of years. How do we see it sustainable? Yeah. The final part of that.
I'm not sure it's that nuanced. I mean, I think that the teaching is listening, and I think that a lot of leadership is listening. And if we're listening to what we've heard on this panel, what we hear every day from our students, from their families, from our communities, it's not that nuanced. We need courageous leadership at every level, at every level. Leadership that sets upon a course of an assets-based philosophy in everything that we do as a system, that asks the questions around not only belief systems, but what are we willing to do to enact those belief systems? And what does that mean? And are we as a system, and it doesn't matter which system, it doesn't matter if it's charter school network, it doesn't matter if it's a small district, it doesn't matter if it's the largest unified school district in the country. What are we doing as a system to support a assets-based structure that gets to transformed outcomes at every level? I'm going to just race through 6 things that I think systems should be demanding. In California, we call the UC and state system college graduation, college entrance requirements the A through G. Almost every state has a version of that. We have set our graduation standards that all students will meet the A through G requirements, period. And we are implementing it with fidelity, and there comes a point with certain things that you just have to make it happen. And you cannot take anything less than a relentless commitment to getting there, and the A through G with fidelity is one of them. It was mentioned restorative practices. We looked at our disproportionate suspension rate 2 years ago, and it was so appalling that we just stopped suspending students because there was no way that we could continue this. I can't. It's just, it turns me, when I look, anyway, we stopped because there was nothing else we could do but stop and replace that with implementing by 2020, every school in our district will be fully trained and fully operational with restorative practices as the quote-unquote school climate system in our schools. So that is a policy level. Things that people don't talk about. We can absolutely, in this country, in every district, in every city, make sure that every child who is struggling with conditions of poverty has access to high-quality early childhood education from the age of 3, but it must be directly connected to a systematic and connected early literacy program to make sure that by 3rd grade they are at reading level. It can be done if we invest in it and we believe in it and we commit that nothing less than making it happen is acceptable. I think arts education should be a right for every student and not a privilege for the affluent and the lucky, and that is what hooks a lot of us. Me, myself, I wouldn't be here right now. Two more things. We fund now based on an equity index. 82% of our children in LA Unified School District live in conditions of poverty. Not all poverty is the same. And we now have developed with the Advancement Project a series of 14 indicators ranging from gun violence, access to health care, nutrition, housing density, all types of things that influence concentration and differentiate concentration and what it means and how it affects students and communities. And we resource our schools not based on equal distribution, which, equal opportunity has been, the lie of that has been proved in our outcomes. So we fund every school and every pot of money based on an equity index. That is possible in every school district. And the last thing that I would say is that we started something called Student Recovery Day. And what we do is one day every year, we empty out every district office, every school office, and we have a list of all the students who have left school, who have been pushed out. We don't use the word dropout anymore because we know we've pushed our students out. And we go around, we set up phone banks, and we go around door to door, and we literally find the students who have left. And our message is just very, very clear. Why did you leave? Please come back, and we're not complete without you. And through that work alone, there's now been 7 student recovery days. Through that work alone, we have been able to produce over 4,000 diplomas just from students that we recover on those days. The students who we have pushed out of our system are still in our community, and it is never too late to recover, not the student, but to recover our system and make our systems whole. So those are some things that I would encourage us to be working on.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So I have a variety of questions here, and I'm going to work to get to as many as I can because I want to make sure we close on time. So one of the questions, and I think this is an important one, when we talk about extended learning time, extending the day, extending the school year, as Alan mentioned, what does this look like in reality for our teachers and the impact? And so our teachers have a lot of demands coming at them, and the question is, what does the whole panel think can be done to maintain gains and to make the turnaround sustainable for teachers? And so maybe to talk about that, because this does not get done without, there was a lot of teachers in the room. This does not get, you are the foundation of this. Our community is also the foundation in being part of the decision, but if we don't make this sustainable for our teachers and support them, it's not gonna happen, and you're not gonna get this long-term growth that we wanna see, so, with our children. So maybe, not everybody, but if anyone would like to start.
Sure. I can start because definitely with the tutoring program, it may seem that we're asking the teachers to do one more thing. It is actually not that way with the tutoring program that I'm describing. What we did with Blueprint was we went out and hired a series of tutors that had to meet a certain criteria, BA, pass a math aptitude test, brought those folks in, created space for them, and they were the ones that worked with the students in that tutoring, which allowed us to give our teachers more planning time and work time so that they would not feel overburdened. What we then also did with that is, because the tutoring model was 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, created time for the tutors to give information to the teachers and the teachers to give information to the tutors so that they knew how to work with the students once they received them on both ends. What we found is that teachers had more time to collaborate, plan, and assess. And what we also found is they were dealing with less behavior, less student disruption, because the students were finding success in the tutoring, and that was carrying over into the rest of their classes.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Go ahead, Scott.
Sure. Yeah, I think ensuring that teachers feel connected to the vision of turning around a struggling school is absolutely just a job one. And there's a few things. The obvious, supporting teachers in instruction, teacher coaches, curriculum that's accessible and enables teachers to be their best. But I would say the challenge is really around the other work, the emotional work, the work of building community. One of the things we've recently begun doing is having professional learning committee time, just time for groups of staff to meet, typically 12 staff, to process what it means to be a teacher in our context. So conversations about race, conversations about trauma-informed care, conversations just about the difficulty and joys of doing this work together and making sure that is part of the experience for teacher and for staff. And then finally, about the building or enabling relationships with students and families, which is generally where the heart of teachers come into this profession, and trying to both provide time, provide training, and to celebrate that, I think, is important to make sure that teachers, again, want to do this work and feel great about being a teacher.
Thanks, Scott. Briefly, because I want to get to the other questions. Go ahead. Yep.
I think when we think about sustainability, we also have to really examine what that means, because we think about time and we think about compensation for that time. Our district does provide extended learning time stipends for teachers who work at extended day schools. But I think there's more to the picture than just the compensation and just the hours that thinks about what helps a teacher stay in this profession for the long term. I think, is your effort channeled into results, or is it dissipated? Is your effort wasted? You put all this energy into this, and then that student goes to the next classroom and they unlearn all of the systems you put in place. So all of the systems and the centralized support we provide for teachers is designed with that vision of sustainability, that your effort is produced into results. Do you have high quality interactions with your colleagues? Does the teacher's lounge feel antagonistic, or is it a place of support? Does everybody be on the same page? Do they have your back? Right? And we really sweat that adult culture in our buildings, thinking about how can we make this a positive and exciting place to work? And then, are you getting better? Is your voice heard by leadership? Do you have an opportunity in your role to be respected for the great work you do? Is that celebrated? Are you collaborating with colleagues? And I think when we think about sustainability, we need to think about hours, we need to think about compensation, but we also need to expand our vision to include those other pieces. Otherwise, even if compensated, our teachers won't stay in the profession.
All right, thank you. I want to ask this question to the panelists, and one or two. How can school leaders partner with union leaders when a school is failing or underperforming?
Okay. First of all, I think it's absolutely possible. I think it is, but it has to start. It has to start from, like I said, an assets-based heart and mind theory, and So our contracts have to be about our kids, and understanding that that teachers, but not just teachers, all school staff who are also approached from an asset-based mindset about what they can do, about how we will support what they want to do. If you don't believe in our kids, and you don't believe in our families, and you don't believe in our communities, you should not be around our kids. Like, that's very clear. But that's a very small percentage of folks. The much larger percentage of folks really want to do the right thing. And while we can't teach will, we can absolutely teach skills. And we can absolutely do the types of wraparound support for getting to better that most teachers and enlightened labor leaders want to see in their contracts. So as conditions for teaching and learning improve, and let's redefine that and reframe that. Let's not talk about conditions for teaching and learning around this deficit safety issue of like, is my, what happens at 4 o'clock? No, like that's in the past. And if you are afraid to be in our communities, again, then find somewhere else to work. What I'm talking about is the school site and the entire system geared around helping you get to better for kids, helping you and everyone in that school feel like the support is actually there systemically and practically and on a day-to-day basis to get to better. And when you start from that premise, then it is possible with enlightened leadership to do this in partnership. Okay. It's not easy, but it's possible.
So, what might be some specific strategies? So, from someone else that may want to take on this question.
I mean,
Let me jump in here, please, just because I'll just give one quick thing. There is no enlightened leadership in the United States right now. The most depressing thing about the educational kind of blob in the United States is the relationship between these two parties that lock heads every 2 years on minutia. If you read most of the teachers' contracts in the United States of America and watch every 2 years as they go to battle with each other, I don't have a hopeful message for you, but to tell you it's a hot mess. And kids are in trouble because of it, right? In every big major urban city, kids are in trouble because of it's a nice rosy picture to paint, but even in LA, some very positive things that I think would be good for kids are lost at that damn table between labor and management. And I can say that with no judgment of either party, because I think they're both a hot mess on both sides. I think there's nothing more prehistoric in education than the negotiation process between those two parties, and it's hurting kids in every city. And I can't sit here and not tell you the truth about that. I'm sorry for that.
No, I completely agree with that. I also think it's very it's just political. It's not about the children.
Not at all.
When we did the contract in Newark, it was a battle even to the end. We did get a lot of good things in there, but there was a ton in the contract that's been there for decades. It's terrible. It's not about children. It's about protecting adult interest. And so I think the best way to tackle disagreement with unions is to really talk to the membership. Talk to the membership. Have the membership be the voice. Have teachers speak up and say, I want to be represented this way. I want you to talk about my kids. I don't want to talk about what's always been in the contract and why it's been there. I want to talk about, is this the best thing for our children? Is this the best way to support me as a teacher so that I can do my job, be supported, be rewarded for the hard work I do, be teaching next to other teachers who are just as good. And if the teacher next door to me is ineffective, don't protect that teacher. It's not good. Protect me.
Thank you, Vanessa. You gonna say
Do
something
you
quick?
want to have a little back and forth or no?
I'm totally fine with that, Steve. So, but can you keep?
It's just a question.
Yeah, please, yes. But let's keep
I mean,
moving.
I guess my response is that I'll acknowledge the present state of affairs, but is there no possibility that things can be built into a contract that really are assets-based and support-based? I mean, is there
I mean,
no possibility that's
There's
possible?
possibilities, there are pieces of it. I think we did some of that, but
As did we.
I also think that it is a very hard process to really take, most of our contracts in this city, in this country for school districts are very archaic and very hard to change all pieces of it. You can, you know, ensure pieces of it are aligned with your core values, but all of it, no. I think it is very, very hard to move that. And it will take decades for us to change that work.
I don't really like politics, so I don't think it works, and I think that's like a big problem with the unions. Like, I think the idea of unions is great. I want teachers to be protected, but I think like this is just symptomatic of the fact that so much political stuff just happens outside a school building. Yeah. So as a principal, I can't really comment on, you know, the relationship with the unions, because like, what is that, you know, but I can comment on like what I can do in my building, and ultimately what affects me is if I don't manage the adult climate in my building, if I'm not being a responsible leader, then it's going to escalate and it's going to go up to the union. So it's my responsibility. I have a great union rep. I'm very lucky to have that person on staff. It's my responsibility to work with her and to create a space where teachers can air concerns. Because I'm not a perfect leader. I make a lot of mistakes. But you know what? Like, I just have to own those, and I have to create space within my school for teachers to come to me and say that's a problem, so they don't have to escalate it to the unions to get me fired. And ultimately, that's what I have to think about, and that's my responsibility. I have to own how my teachers feel in the building. Now, there are legitimate concerns. People have grieved to the unions because our facilities don't have an elevator. We have multiple floors. People have grieved to the unions because of the temperature in our building at times. And guess what? Ultimately, 3 years later, our boiler was fixed, and now we have temperature regulation. That's pretty awesome. So there is a way to work these things to your advantage, but I think you have to just, and I think as you said, you have to anchor it in what do kids need and what do teachers need to support kids to get what they need. And I think as a building principal, I just try to stay under the radar of everybody else, and I try to really work my relationship with our union rep, with the teachers in my building, so that teachers don't feel that they have to go somewhere else to be protected from me. They should feel that I am their advocate just as their union rep is their advocate. And we've tried to create processes where, well, thank you. We've tried to create processes where going to Jackie, she's our union rep, where going to Jackie does not have retribution, where you know that you're going to her so that she can bring things to me, and we have regular check-ins so that she can bring that feedback to me to make sure that teachers' voices are heard.
All right, thank you. This is going to be the last one, and then I have a question from the audience that I'm going to use as our closeout question for the panel. So this is something we didn't talk about that I think is important. You know, how do we ensure that our students, the children in our schools, don't feel that they are failures when we label our schools failing? And I think that's important and a challenge. So last question to the panel, and then I'm going to give your final charge to the audience. Any questions? Does anyone like to tackle that one first?
Sure. Yeah, I think you know there's clearly a theme here around, as Steve mentioned, sort of asset-based, coming from a strength, also recognizing sort of history of disinvestment of racism in schools. As a school, we have a responsibility to sort of shoot straight with our parents and with our kids about the road ahead in terms of the academic gains that are required so our kids will be successful. It's also our responsibility to send messages that we believe in our kids, that they are resilient and capable, and to act every day in every interaction in the classroom in the school that sends those messages. So certainly sort of labeling a failing school is not a productive way to start. But building that, we are building a community together so that everyone in this classroom, everyone in this school is going to pursue their dreams and bring their community and their family the things that they, you know, their dreams. I think that is a frame that connects certainly with parents and kids, so it's completely possible.
Thank you, Scott. Any other final comments? Leslie? Okay.
I would also add the importance of representation in our curriculum. Our students are typically brown and black, and let's just be honest, white students wake up every day in a country that proclaims to them, you are great, you come from greatness. Every time you turn on the TV, everything you read in a history book, that is what story is told. And I think it's crucial, in addition to the daily messages of you can and you will, and you can absolutely deserve to be great, Our students need to see themselves represented in our curriculum. They need to see their history represented. They need to be told every day through the non-subtle messages, you come from greatness, you will produce greatness. And if we just say that and don't live that, are there teachers of color who give them examples of greatness? We need to make sure that representation exists as much for our students as it does for their white peers. And I think not just saying that, but also putting the time and energy invested into living that for our students is very important.
I would say the adults that are with our children every day matter the most. They will make our children feel and know their worth.
Awesome. All right, so here, we're going to close out here. I'm going to ask the panelists to take 1 minute, and we're 1 minute, a real minute, a beard minute. All right. So it may be, here's a question. This comes from the audience. So I had a question, but I like this one better. So thank you all for participating. If I didn't get to yours, I apologize. I'll try to get to as many as possible. I encourage you to follow up with the panelists, reach out to them, call them, email. I'm sure that they would love to discuss this with you further. It may be difficult to solve this failing school dilemma because the larger system is filled with inequality. It's broken. If you could be radical, which some argue is the only solution, how would you change the system of schooling so that more of our schools, none of our schools, fail our children? Final thought, 1 minute. I have 4 boys in them.
All right,
She's like, bring it.
here we go. 1 minute. I got 3 things we would do. 4. All right, first, I can only speak for Pennsylvania. The funding in certainly the state of Pennsylvania is systemically racist, biased against poor communities. I'd fix the funding formula so that all kids get equal funding at the very least. Second, I think as we've talked about here, the mindset of both schools, of teachers, of school leaders, needs to change, needs to evolve. We need to recognize our kids are in front of us, their strength, their possibilities, and I think that is sort of part of a revolutionary change. Third, I think we need to do what works. So if district does not have capacity to turn around a school, then of course we look to a charter. And if a charter can't do it, then of course we look to other options, like the keeping in front of us. In the case that Alan gave, that 90% of the kids who are dropping out or end up in incarceration needs to be our North Star, so that we do the very difficult things that need to be done in order. Fourth, I would say we need more great teachers, and Mastery is hiring, and there's a booth, so join the fight.
All right, thank you. Alan? Ready?
Thank you, yes. As I was gathering my thoughts, one of the main things that I thought about was how we change the approach to teaching and how we look at our programs at our universities. I do believe we have some great individuals that should be in front of our students, but the hoops that they have to jump through in many cases to get to our students makes it prohibitive and makes it like they don't want to do it. The other thing is we need to recognize our adults for their experiences. The world is changing so fast, the way that our students have access to information, and we need to look at the way that we do school. We cannot continue to do school the way that we've seen. I think the 21st century has evolved, and we have done a lot of things to change the way that we look at technology use in school, but I don't think the district has evolved to 21st century. I still think that is the same, and so we have to look at our model very differently from a systemic level. And then the last thing that I'll say is, and this may be pie in the sky, changing lives is difficult work, and I think it's supposed to be difficult. And the people that do this day in and day out need to be compensated and have the resources to do the job because they make the biggest difference each and every day. And so if we could figure out a way to help our teachers, who I see every day working so hard with our students, but then 70% of them have a second job. We need to change that, and I think we would. fare better.
Thank you, Al. Como, do you want to go next? Are you ready? One more time.
I don't have too much to add. I think the funding formula, we need to pay teachers more. We need to get everything we want to do for kids costs money. We need to get that money into schools, and we need to make sure that there isn't it isn't lost in the process of going from the state or from the federal government to the state, and then to the state to the district, and then from the district to this the black box that disappears like everything, and then the school actually gets 50 cents on the dollar, even 10 cents on the dollar. The money needs to go directly to schools. It needs to be earmarked so that it produces direct results for students. But everything that we want to do for kids comes down to getting funding for those programs, and how do we make sure that those things are possible? I mean, there's all kinds of other radical solutions that I think at a social level would be very important. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how does this money actually affect students? And that money exists in our country. It just needs to get to the right people.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Christian, would you like to go next?
Now, is this a wish list? Like whatever, like radically what I would do?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
1 minute.
All right, wow, with 1 minute.
Sure.
So I would start with having state and national leaders that really paid attention to family economic security. I would do a radical thing around healthcare, that it would be universal, and prenatal care would just be like aggressive, and I would make sure that we fully fund universal preschool, to make sure that we had access to, for every 4-year-old and 3-year-old that wanted to be, and their parents wanted them to be in a classroom with a fully licensed and fully functional teacher, that would happen. I would start reversing the industrialization of education and start thinking about descale rather than how do we scale stuff up. I think we always ask the wrong question, how do we scale stuff up, and then we make it big and industrialized and bureaucratized. I would actually start descaling, and we would have smaller schools. We would have many more smaller kind of therapeutic schools that were really connected to the communities that they were in, and had people staffed by people who were indigenous teachers who were teaching where they were from. So that students saw people that looked like them. And then I would concentrate really on leaders, staff, and program. Quality leaders in every building. How do teachers get into classrooms? How are they trained? How are they prepared? We have 1,700 colleges of ed. That's too many, and they have wildly different levels of quality. We need the brightest of the bright coming into our schools to teach our kids. And then program. Not all of the programs that we have for kids and curriculum for kids, they are disconnected from it. School is boring as hell for so many kids, and I'm bored by it. I dare you to go sit in some of these high school classes as a student again for a day, and you will want to be a sniper. And then the last thing that I will say is that there are 3 things I really care about. I really care about high standards that are the same across the board, so that we don't play games with knowing where our kids are. I really care about accountability when things go wrong. There will be interventions when this is not working. And the last thing I care about is my family needed choices. I have 5 kids. They needed 5 different kinds of situations going on. I got some kids that are more special than others, right? I love them all. One's my favorite, but I love them all. But I needed choices in my life. So those 3 things I really care about. High standards, I really care about accountability, and I really care about options.
Awesome. Thank you. Steve?
Let me start out by agreeing with Chris, especially on the issue of indigenous teachers from our communities. And we should be setting a goal that at least 50% of the teach right now of the students in the next generation of teachers are the students in our high schools. And we can invest in that, and we can make sure that they have outstanding training and support. And I believe that will make a huge difference. And coming, from Teach for America, beginning my core experience in a community that was not my own, that creating a program in our district to do that has been was a priority of mine at the school site level, and is now a priority at the district level. So I think that is very important. I think that this should be, in terms of dreaming, this should be the last monolingual generation. And that we should set a goal as a nation that by 2030, the kindergarten class of 2018, 2019, that every student will be academically at least biliterate or multiliterate, and that the instruction around language acquisition is outstanding instructional practice, and I think will make a huge difference. And plus, it lifts the asset of a student's language, history, culture, community, and family. The last two things is one that I continue to fail at, as you've seen today, which is I would figure out a way to end the education wars. I would figure out a way to get us to all come together and just, like a national educational wraparound and embrace of each other to really move this question forward, turn us towards each other instead of against each other. And the last thing, I was talking we were talking to my mom yesterday, who actually grew up in Brooklyn in conditions of extreme poverty. And the City University system of New York was the only way that generation was lifted out of poverty. When my partner asked her, like, well, how did you pay for college? Oh, college was free. Brooklyn College was free. The whole City University system was free. The city invested in the students of the next generation. And if I could dream, that's what I would like to see again in every major urban center in this country.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And I'll let quickly Vanessa close, please.
Yes, quickly.
I'll take us home.
I completely agree with everyone on the panel, and I think that we at Teach for America, we talk about being a movement. We have to truly be a movement. It is time for us to be as angry and as motivated for change immediately. And I think we have to start behaving that way every day, not just in our classrooms, but everywhere that we go. That this is unacceptable that we have so many of our children who are not getting their human rights met, period. And we have to move in the same direction. So I agree with you, Steve. We have to come together, and we have to really be the movement that Wendy talked about 25 years ago. We have to push further. We're not there yet, and we have to continue to push.
Thank you. So, thank you. So we're gonna, just as we close, and I'll read this because it's hard to read with the light. Just want to close with this, and this is, Ralph Ellison is one of my favorite writers. My youngest son is named Ellison after Ralph Ellison. If you can show me how I can cling to that which is real to me while teaching me a way into the larger society, then I will not only drop my defenses and my hostility, but I will sing your praises, and I will help to make the desert bear fruit. Mm-hmm. And for me, this is grounded in my own personal experience growing up in Prince George's County, and my own children that are at home, and the children that all of us are working with. We not only have to close this gap with academics, we have to help them and teach them to navigate a culture of power and maintain their identity. Because this culture of power, this mainstream culture in the United States that a lot of the panelists talk about is subtly, meaning us, meaning me, teachers, subtly reinforces this culture of power that devalues our children's culture every day in subtle ways and not so subtle ways. And I hope that we leave here, there are many approaches to close this gap and have more opportunities. I heard over 35 things to do right now in the past 4 minutes that we can go and do right now. And I'll close with this, because I always look to my elders, and I talked to Howard Fuller, who is a civil rights activist and a former superintendent of Milwaukee, and he said, you know what, Jeremy, you keep looking for what is a silver bullet, what to figure out. He's like, I've been on this earth and I've traveled around the sun 70 times, Jeremy. It's been done before, man. It's been done. He was like, everything you're going to say to me right now, it's been done. What you need to figure out is, what does that community need that day, in that moment? Have you talked to your parents and kids? Have you talked to the community leaders? You have to learn and listen. And so he said to me, look, man, for 400 years in the history of country, you've had two groups. You've had the industrialists who were invested in a certain population of going back to slavery, because they wanted them to provide a labor force at a certain rate. That's why they wanted to close the gap, to make sure that they had certain skills to get into the factories or what have you. You had another group, the missionaries, abolitionists, civil rights leaders. Historically, 400 years, the same cycle. They were empathizing with the community. Howard said to me, Jeremy, we have never in the history of our country ever brought people from the community in a position of power to the table to make decisions for the things that are impacting their children and their community. And until we do that, we will have Groundhog Day over and over again. And I take ownership in that as a leader. And what am I doing? What do I need to do differently? I need to learn from my mistakes. Have I really asked my parents and kids to sit at the table and to help make decisions as a school leader, as a system leader? Because until we do that, it's Groundhog Day. And Howard's voice in my head, I hear that every day. What can I do differently to make that happen? And that's my charge to you, is that, if we're going to do this at a large scale, think how we're bringing these community leaders, families, and kids to the table. That is my charge, and we need to work. And like we talked with Steve and Vanessa, how are we going to collaborate? How are we going to push and ensure that inequity and opportunity is changed in our lifetime? Like my father said, I got work to do. And as you leave out here, I thank you for the commitment to our children, and I thank you for the work that you've done, and I thank you for the work that you are about to do. I'm proud to stand beside all of you that are willing to fight for our children to close this gap in our lifetime, because that is why I do this work. These people here are amazing people that have put their life in, and you are amazing. There's so many teachers that are here that are making a difference in children's lives. Thank you for your commitment to the children, to our communities. Thank you for coming and sharing some time with us today. And thank you to our panel. I really appreciate your time that you put in today. Thank you.